Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and tonight we're joined by Mark Meuser. He's a candidate coming up in the special election for the State Senate District 7. And welcome to the show, Mark.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a joy of being here.
Glad to have you. So, talk to us a little bit about what a special election is and why they occur.
Okay. In California, we have both the federal and state elections. In the federal, you have your president, your United States senators, and your Senate, and your congressmen. And then in the state side, you have governor, constitutional offices, a Senate, and the Assembly. Now, special elections can be for about anybody other than a U.S. senator. If we have a U.S. senator, the governor appoints. In the case of the lieutenant governor, the governor appoints. But pretty much all other offices, if somebody vacates, there must be a special election to replace a U.S. congressman, a state senator, or an assembly member. And the governor is given a very short window in which to call that election. So in Senate District 7, which is the East Bay area, everything east of the Oakland, Berkeley Hills, and Contra Costa and Alameda County, the state senator, Mark DeSaulnier, won a seat in Congress. He can't hold both a United States Congress seat and a state Senate seat, so he must vacate the state Senate seat.
Okay.
And as such, the governor will soon be calling for a special election for Senate District 7.
Okay. So give us a little background on the reasons people vacate office. I mean, so the elections are one.
Yeah, in 2014, there were 3 state senators who ran for Congress and won. So 1 in the Bay Area and 2 down in Southern California. So on the same day, across the state, there's going to be 3 special elections going on. But there's only one in Northern California, and it's in the East Bay. In 2013, there was a senator who just had some family issues, and so he actually got a job closer to home, and he resigned. And so when they resigned, they created a special election, and that took place in 2013. You can also get a special election if somebody died.
Do we get enough of them for people being arrested in Sacramento? Because that would be preferable, I think.
Well, I've actually heard that if you look at the California Senate, it has a higher percentages of people committing felonies than the city of Fresno, which is one of the highest in the state of California.
So something to aspire to for the other folks.
But yes, as probably most of your listeners know, there was a senator recently convicted of a felony and actually only ended up spending 90 minutes in jail instead of the 90 days in jail he was supposed to because of overcrowding, something that he was part of, but we won't go into that. And that special election is actually going to be held in December. So down in Los Angeles County, there is a special election in December to replace the senator who had to vacate his position because of a felony he committed.
Well, like I said, maybe there should be more of those kinds of special elections. But in this particular case, so December is that special election, and it'll be held by itself.
Yes.
And then in March, there are at least 3 positions that they would be looking at filing.
That is correct.
So out of curiosity, does it really just depend on the size of the district or the disbursement? How much do these things cost when a special election occurs from the state perspective, not from the candidate perspective?
I honestly have not looked into it, what the cost is to do one of these special elections. Believe it or not, that over the last, probably 6 years, there have been over 10 special elections because, when a state senator resigns, usually the assembly people who are underneath him are going, and that creates a special election for their seat. So there's usually multiple special elections that can happen, and there's been quite a few over the last 5-7 years. So it's an expense that everybody's ready to pay.
And it's a kind of a domino effect, as you alluded to. If you lose a senator and then the assembly people behind them run to fill that, then you're sure to have another special election, and it just kind of rolls downhill from there.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. And so from a candidate perspective, talk to us about turnout, and is it easier or harder to raise funds when it's just the special election versus being able to kind of ride on the coattails of a presidential or a gubernatorial candidate? Harder, easier? What's the turnout look like?
Well, let me just give you an example. In Senate District 7 in 2012, I believe there's over 350,000 votes cast just for Senate District 7. Now, there's 1 million people in the district. Not all of them are registered because you have minors and people who are not U.S. citizens who are living in the district, but 350,000 people voted. In a special election, we've had state Senate special elections that have only had 40,000 people vote for all the candidates total. So it can be very low. Believe it or not, up in Northern California, they recently had a special election where they had like over 160,000 people vote in the special election. That is a very unusual, and I've noticed that in Northern California, they evidently really like to vote in their special elections. They don't happen that often. Voter turnout is low. Maybe 80 to 100,000 in the Bay Area are going to turn out to vote. Probably 80% of the people who cast ballots will be somebody who has a mail order ballot, and so it's just a matter, one race, I'm going to check one box, put a stamp on it, and mail it. Mm-hmm. The turnout at the poll on the polling day is just really dismal.
Do they actually do the normal polling places in these kinds of situations, or is there some consolidated way of doing it? Because I would assume it's harder to find people willing to open up their facility for voting.
My understanding is that it's up to the counties how they handle that. I know Contra Costa, in this one, they recently redesigned all their precincts so that they could handle whether it is a presidential election or a special election, that the polling places could be consistent throughout so people had a uniformity and they knew where to go and they didn't have to worry about consolidating. Rather than have a whole team of 6 to 8 people, there might only be 2 people at a polling place. So there are ways that they can cut the resources that they need to do a special election because they won't need as many, but they still have to have, at least in Contra Costa, I have been informed that they're going to have the same amount of polling places.
Okay. And so is it harder or easier to raise the funds, and do you have to raise the same level of funding that you would if you were running in the pack and trying to break through the noise of all the other election things going on?
Well, that's a fun question. The first aspect is when you have a president or a governor race, they get the big money. They're the ones who get the TV time. They get the media time, and everybody else is just really trying to get their little piece of the pie. Right. When it's a special election, it's going to vary. Right now, there is a special election going on in Louisiana for a U.S. Senate seat. Now, the caucuses, the Republicans and the Democrats, are deciding how much money are they going to pay into that race, how much do they want one more seat. And they're looking at their polling and what can they do about it. A lot is going to come down to the individual race and the numbers. In my particular case, it will be a Republican pickup if I can win, or I would hopefully say when I win.
Right.
But in order to get the pickup, there's going to need to be resources. And so it's a domino effect. First off, do the numbers support a swing from one party to the next? If it does, then in my case, the Republican Party is going to look at how much resources they could put into it, because on a state party and a county party, they can actually use this special election to raise money into their coffers. So if everybody agrees that it's a winnable seat, which is what we're understanding that SD7 is going to be a pickup for the Republicans in a special election, they're willing to put so many more resources. So for me as a candidate, it is actually much easier to raise money because I get the support of, all the party infrastructure, and then the third house or the lobbyists are also, they see it as a potential to take a seat away from the Democrats to the Republicans. So it's easier. It's not necessarily, Democrats still control Sacramento, and there are plenty of lobbyists who will just not donate to a Republican because they're only going to donate to the party in power because that's the one who controls legislation. So it's not, my Democrat counterparts are going to have a lot easier job fundraising because they're the party in power.
Right.
My job fundraising is much easier than if I was in a normal general election, but it's not as easy as my opponents.
So you've got the undivided attention factor for getting the focus and getting in front of the various people who might be receptive to a Republican candidate, but also there's a special wind that's blowing through your senatorial target district, being that Catherine Baker just also seems that she's elected. It's not certified yet, but it sounds like she's got it.
Yes, Catherine Baker won Assembly District 16. And Assembly District 16 is 100% within Senate District 7. Senate districts are twice as big as Assembly districts, so there's about 1 million people in a Senate seat and about 500,000 in an Assembly seat. And everybody who vote for Catherine Baker could actually go for the Senate seat. So what that does in this special election is it now gives a Republican voice in the Bay Area. We have been lacking that for many years here, where there is no congressman, no assembly, no state senator, not even a United States senator, who was giving the Republican perspective. Now the media, when an issue comes up, they have a Republican that they can go to and get the Republican view of what's going on. So people are going to see that they're going to see Catherine Baker on a regular basis giving the Republican side of the issue of what's going on in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And because of that, people are going to be more accustomed to seeing, oh, Republicans can win in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to actually change the mindset of the voters. It's going to also help the volunteers. Mm-hmm. Because the volunteers see that there's a victory. They see that Republicans can win in the Bay Area. And so there is an increased level of excitement. You know, I announced that I was running just a couple, 4 days after the general election, and already it's just the volunteers are just flooding in, and it's really exciting to see how Catherine Baker's win in the Bay Area has just electrified the Bay Area to help get a second Republican in the Bay Area, one in the Senate, one in the Assembly.
Okay. Well, talk to us a little bit about your background in politics, and this isn't your first trip to the rodeo. You've been involved in politics for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about how that transpired, what prompted you to run for the office at this point, and a little bit about why you think you can win in the platform you're pursuing.
That's a loaded question, but I'll tell a fun story. The first time I worked in a campaign, I was 14 years old. One of my friends' father was running for a seat, and I went and walked my neighborhood putting a door hanger on every single door. And pretty much every election since then, I have been a good volunteer. Sometimes I've been on a staff and actually been paid. And I've done a lot of different things. I've been the volunteer. I've been a campaign manager. I've been a chief of staff of an elected official. I've worked on ballot initiatives. I have written legislation both as a chief of staff, but also as an attorney. I've worked for some in the past I worked for a medical ministry that had a needs sharing, so I worked on their legislation nationwide, helping them write legislation. In 2012, I ran for this seat, the SD7, Senate District 7. I was running against the incumbent, and there was you could say a tidal wave of blue that hit the state of California that it was not very conducive for a Republican winning. In a special election, though, with the low voter turnout, it is a completely different race, and that's why there's so much excitement in it.
Right, and so really it's up to the candidate that gets out the vote the most, and assuming that you're the only one that throws your hat in the ring, and we'll get into your competitors in a minute, but there's some potential for them to split up their own vote and for you to also get an advantage that way.
Yeah, an example, in 2013 I mentioned a Senate seat that most people would know as the Andy Vitek race that happened in the Central Valley. In that case, I believe there was like 8 Democrats and 1 Republican. And the 8 Democrats were just fighting each other, and Andy Vitek was getting his message out. And at the end of the day, he ended up with just falling short of the 50%. And because he didn't get 50% plus 1, there actually went into a runoff, which happens, and the top 2, it becomes a top 2 runoff. So if I don't get 50% in the first round, then it goes to the top 2, and then whoever gets the most there will win it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Andy Vidak race, just as an aside, was funny. I went and volunteered in Fresno in the 108-degree heat as well, and seeing the Democrat opponent attacking Andy for wanting to do things like let farmers have water was entertaining on one level and sick on another. But that's a whole other side conversation.
The water problems our state is coming through right now, it's really appalling, because last time I checked, everybody in California actually eats food. And in order to have food, the farmers need to grow it. Now, in order for farmers to grow food, they need water. So why, a couple years ago, when we had that early rain hit the area, why'd they open up all the dams and just let the water go out into the bay? Why didn't they just, close up the dams and start storing? Our water problems would have been a lot better if, when it was raining, you saved your rainwater. You didn't have to just flush it down because there might be more water coming later.
Well, there might be more money coming later, so that Sacramento likes to spend it all too. It's just the way they roll. We can't do anything about that unless you get in, right?
That's true. One of my bosses once said, it's amazing what you could get done once you're actually elected.
True statement. So talk to us a little bit about what your plan is and why you think you're electable.
Okay. Well, as I said, there are many issues that it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. One of the examples is our roads. Both Republicans and Democrats, they drive cars. Now, some may drive them more than others, but everybody needs good roads. And right now, here in the state of California, 68% of our roads are in mediocre to poor condition. And I believe it's like 28% of our bridges are functionally obsolete or dysfunctional. It's estimated that we need $200 billion to bring our roads back up to the standards we had in the 1970s. And back in the 1960s and 70s, we were spending, in today's dollars, equivalent of $250 per citizen. We're now only spending $150. Where's that other $100 going? It's going to special interest pet projects that some legislator has. Instead of spending the money on what everybody agrees on needs to be done, we're wasting the money on pet projects. Now, if we have better roads, number one, California spends roughly $14 billion every year on automobile repair costs that could be avoided if our roads were up to the proper standard. And they say that after we build the roads, it's going to increase the California economy by probably $11 billion every year, just by getting our own infrastructure back on place, where people in the Bay Area are not spending 2 hours trying to get to work. Mm-hmm. We're wasting time, we're wasting efficiency, and hey, for those who claim to be green, all the time those cars are sitting, they're just putting smog up in the atmosphere. Get the cars moving. You're going to have a lot less carbon footprint there.
Yeah. So you're saying that actually repairing road surfaces could improve traffic as well and reduce greenhouse gases? Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier that there's a couple Democrats who are talking about getting in the race. One is Susan Bonilla, an assemblywoman from Concord. The other is Joan Buchanan, a assemblywoman who's just been termed out. And both of them voted to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a train to nowhere. A train that's not going to affect a single person's commute into work. Yeah, it may alleviate some traffic on the 5, but the last time I checked, even in the worst conditions, you can still drive down to LA in a reasonable period of time. But they want to put this train to nowhere, call it crony, union paybacks, whatever you want to call it. It's taking billions of dollars away from the transportation system that will make Californians' life better. Make it so they don't have to do repair costs. Stimulate the economy. Get people to work faster so that they have more time to be at home with their family.
Okay. So we just have a few minutes left. A couple more items that you would want to address if you were elected?
Well, I think it's very, very sad that one of the greatest states in the nation, California, has one of the worst education systems. And it's because of Sacramento. And to ask the question, why is it that the more Sacramento tries to handle our education, the worse it gets for our kids. Why is it that we're having to cut extracurricular activities? Why is it? And the answer is Sacramento is putting so many bureaucratic rules on our school districts that school districts spend all their money on administrators. And as they spend money on administrators, it takes it away from the teachers who are teaching the classes. It takes it away from these extracurricular activities that everybody says is good for our students, the arts, the sports, the music programs, all the programs that everybody wants their kids to do that we're having a hard time funding is because we have this middle management bureaucracy that has to be paid, which creates even more pension problems, which takes even more money out of the school system to pay these pensions for these people who are there to satisfy Sacramento. And we need to do something about it. We need to, there have been school districts across this country who have gone to a merit pay system for teachers so that the extraordinary teachers get paid more. And if there's nothing better to motivate a teacher is if they got extra bonus. And if their ability to get more, get a better paycheck is based upon their performance, they're gonna do it.
Right. Okay. Any other platform points?
Well, I mean, the big thing is roads and, roads, education, jobs. It's sad that that the government has declared war on, the jobs in this state. It's just a sad state affair. And the thing is, we want better schools, we want better roads, we need more taxpayers. California used to be the world's 5th largest economy, and we just keep falling and falling and falling. And we're going to keep falling until our government is willing to release some of the restrictions that we're putting on businesses. Make it so that business can be competitive in California rather than going to Texas or rather than going to Tijuana or rather than going to China. Yeah, it's nice that other people have jobs elsewhere, but we live in a beautiful state. We want California to be great. We want it to be golden. This is where, the 49ers came out here to dig for gold. And you know what? It's a land of opportunity. And it has been up until recently when special interests really took over Sacramento. And we need to get in there and just get back to common sense legislating again.
Okay. So if people want to learn more about your approaches to transportation infrastructure, education, and job growth and business friendliness in California, how do they find out more?
www.markmeuser.com.
Spell out Mark Meuser.
MarkMeuser.
Great, Mark. Well, thanks for joining us, educating us on special elections, and sharing a little bit about your evil plan to save California.
Any day.
And we'll be right back after this word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
Good evening and welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. We appreciate their support of the show immensely because it makes it possible for us to come and share this information with you as we have this evening. But what they're really best known for is the speaker series that they conduct now on the second Tuesday of each month at 432 Steerland Road right here in Mountain View at the IFES Portuguese Hall, where they bring in speakers such as this evening, where they will have James O'Keefe talking about journalism and really about how citizen journalists can make a difference in the national political scene. In December, Adam Gillette, Director of Development and Outreach for the Motion Picture Institute, will be joining us at the forum. And in January, Bill Whittle will be returning from PJ Media. Looking at March 10th, Dennis Michael Lynch, producer of They Come to America. In April, John J. Miller from Hillsdale's Dow Journalism Program. And in May, we're looking at former representative from Florida and recipient of the Bronze Star for Valor, Alan West, who many of you are probably big fans of. You can learn more about the upcoming events at the Conservative Forum at theconservativeforum.com. And again, we appreciate Mark coming this evening because special elections, regular elections, let alone special elections, confuse a lot of the citizens about how things work, who's got jurisdiction over what, and really how the civics process operates. This is an opportunity for someone like Mark to get in, to get the attention they need to get elected and make a difference in the state Senate in Sacramento. So do your research, find out a little bit more about Mark, the special election here, or other special elections across the state, and more importantly, get out and support your candidates, whether it be volunteering to get the word out about their campaign, getting all over Facebook, or doing whatever you need to do to make sure your voice is heard and your needs are represented in Sacramento. Because the great thing is, with less competition for your attention and others, you actually can make a difference in other parts of the state that will affect Sacramento. We'd like to thank you again for joining us this evening on The Right Side. I've been your host, Chris Pareja, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in person or on the show sometime soon. Have a great night.